All right, welcome back to the MetaMentors YouTube channel. This is the Crypto Rewind and Forecast. This is a short little episode every week to keep you up to date on what's happening in crypto and Web3. Now, because of some summer travel plans, the next 2 weeks we're going to be out of the studio. So you need to take this information we give you today, study it, go out there, do your own research, be ready to go, because halfway through August, we're going to come back. That's the home stretch towards the Bitcoin halving. Speaking of the halving, Ryan is going to be talking about price predictions and some stuff that's going to happen to Bitcoin before the halving. He told me in secret that he thinks it's going to be $1 million. So
we'll hear
we'll hear what he has to say. It might not get to $1 million, but there's a lot of good stuff happening. Before we talk about that, we're going to talk about the NFT market. OpenSea has recently started a new trading platform where you can trade NFT to NFT without buying, without selling, without doing that whole amount. You can just trade them straight up, which opens up a ton of possibilities.
Yeah, that's awesome.
In the NFT market. So a lot of people have requested it. They're opening it up right now. I think it's called OpenSea Deals, but I'll be talking about that later. And then to wrap it all up, we're going to talk about some more presidential candidate hopefuls.
I give you my word. He's gonna be that harmony.
And their crazy promises. They're probably lying out of their teeth.
He's so smart. He's gonna do it all in one leap.
Some of the stuff they're saying about crypto and Bitcoin, man, it sounds so good. You want to believe them. It's with everything that the current administration is wrenching down on the Web3 market. Some of these guys are saying some stuff that it makes me want to believe them. If they weren't a politician, I'd have a better chance. But, we're going to be talking about that. That's what's going to wrap up our episode. 3 good topics. The timestamps will be below. Make sure you like and subscribe and follow if you like this kind of stuff. And let's get started talking about some NFTs. 3. Now, as I was browsing Exeter, is it called Exeter or just X? What's it called now?
I have no idea what you're even talking about.
Oh, Twitter got rid of the bird. Oh. See this X up here?
Yes.
It is now, people are, I think it's trending. It's called Exeter. It's called X is what they're doing, but everybody's talking about Zitter,
which is die or something. I saw
stuff like that. So they got rid of the bird. It is now X.
I do like the new logo. I mean, when you first said it, I was like, no, why would they do? Right. I'm not questioning Elon. I'm an idiot. But now that you show me the symbol, the new next to the Twitter bird, I'm like, yeah, nice.
Right. They're trying to make it universal.
Did that just say free porn?
Where?
Right above it, right above the X. Scroll up. We're really getting off. A little more. Free porn.
Oh,
yeah, I told you.
Oh, look. Oh, yeah. Because there's a lot of people saying.
Are you sure this is still Twitter? Is this saying Twitter porn?
Before I start typing X anything into my browser, I'm going to have to clear my history. So you know how it is. You know how the internet is.
The struggle is real.
They waste no time. But while I was browsing Exeter today, now I've lost my page. I saw that OpenSea has got this "Let's make a deal" tweet out, and it's where you can trade NFTs straight up. So before this, you pretty much had to sell your NFT and then take that money and then buy the next NFT. But now, in an effort to skip one of those steps, make it a little bit more seamless, you can actually go to OpenSea Deals and make a deal. You connect your wallet. They've got all the stuff up there. You search for whatever you want, but now instead of making an offer in ETH or Matic, whatever you want to pay in, now you can actually propose a trade, your NFT to someone else's NFT. It should at least skip a step and make it a little bit easier and a little bit safer to get the NFTs that you're looking for.
This is freaking awesome. I could see where this would be a huge hit. Like, just that people love to barter and trade. And I'm a holder, so it's probably not up my alley as much, but I love the idea that you could barter and trade, and people love that stuff.
Right. When you think about NFTs in the collectible sense, not just the utility, but the actual collectible sense, there's a lot of places that give away free NFTs. You know, AMC did some free NFTs if you went and saw some certain movies. If you get multiple of those, there's no reason you wouldn't want to trade. Like baseball cards, you don't need two of the same card. You might be looking to trade, and that just makes it more of an actual, you know, you have way more control over your collectibles. I don't want to sell it, get the money, then buy a different one. I just want to trade you straight up. And now you're eliminating the transaction fees and all the stuff to do the 3 parts and just do it straight up, one for one. Very interesting. OpenSea is the leader in Ethereum based NFT trade, or, you know, trading and selling. So
now, are you, and I don't know, I'm asking you flat out, maybe you don't know it because you said you just stumbled upon this. I would assume that OpenSea is charging some type of transaction fee to do it.
I'm sure there is, but if you sell it and then have to buy another one, there's at least 2 transaction fees. So what this is doing is getting a much smaller transaction fee, and you don't have to wait for the close. You know, it's just a quicker, more seamless transaction. And like I said, I think there's something to do in some of the articles I read, something to do with maybe this isn't a taxable event. Of course, we don't really know because the SEC hasn't really locked down what is and what isn't, you know, trade-in and money and stuff. But if you're trading it one for one, there may not be the taxable event that there is if you're selling a $100,000 NFT. So pretty neat. That's what we've got on the NFT market. Ryan's going to tell us about the Bitcoin market, which I believe has dropped back below $30,000. So
it's dropped. I looked just a little bit ago and it's down to 29.1. So it's dropped a good $1,000 almost, depending on, you know, last time you looked. But it's been mainly going sideways for a long time. But the real question, obviously, everybody wants to know is when is it going to get to 100,000? Then when is it going to get to 1 million? And there's these different stages of crypto believers or Bitcoin enthusiasts or maximalists, whatever you want to call it. So there's these different levels, right? And I'm going through this whole transition of where's these levels, you know, where I started, where maybe I was a believer a little bit and then more, and now I'm totally into it. Now I'm dumping all this money into it and all this stuff. So you're constantly asking your question, is it, number one, is it a good investment? Number two, do I buy now or do I wait because maybe it's going to go down in price? And so that's very much where I'm at right now. Is I'm a full-on believer, without a doubt. The evidence is out there. Look for yourself. I know it's going to $1 million and then $10 million and probably even beyond that. And again, we'll add some links and stuff like that. There's tons of evidence. But so as a believer, then the question becomes, do I buy now, which I'm doing every month? I buy a little bit, but with my cash reserves on the side, when do I put those chunks in? And it's a 50-50. Nobody knows the answer to this, right? It's 50-50, and that's not even realistic, but that's how I'm looking at it, that it's either going to go up from here or go down. So I'm constantly doing research to see when that is, because if it's going to the moon from here, then I need to put my money in now, right? Buy it cheap. If it's going to decline, I need to put my money in, you know, wait and put it in as it goes down, or once it gets down to a number that I've agreed to, right? It's all part of your thesis that you got to figure out. And that is ultimately what I'm saying here is this thesis that I'm developing is an ongoing thesis, and I'm drilling stuff into it more and more. And so I'm watching all this content to decide what is Bitcoin's next move going to be. The halving is coming up around April of 2024. And in the halving, typically Bitcoin goes up from there. Now it's generally after, and I'm going to get into some videos here. I'm just kind of rambling, but I wanted to paint a little bit of a picture here. So let's get into these videos. But as we're doing it, I want you to key in on some very important terms. Liquidity is probably the biggest one. Liquidity is what drives the crypto market, and that's worldwide, not just the US if you're here like we are. But there's all these other factors that go into it that play a part, you know, debt, fiat currency, jobless claims, all these other things that are playing into it. And that's what makes it so hard to get a grip on that. So I look for experts that are kind of breaking this down. And one of these guys that is started to show up everywhere is this guy, Benjamin Cowan. And I like him because he's very chart orientated, and he looks at the history and lays out a map. And if history tells the future, which a lot of times it does, that's where you need to at least look to see, is it on trend to do what it's been doing before. So without a further ado, let's go ahead and get into this video. I've got multiple clips. We're going to talk about them as we go. I'm going to try and run through this as quick as possible, but still cover these very important highlights so that you can decide, or at least get a feel of, is Bitcoin going to be at 100,000 by April of next year, which is roughly when the halving is.
And furthermore, the thing that I want people, because going in line with the title of the video, we want to talk about what is the fair value of Bitcoin by the next halving. And the reason why that's important is because I think there's a lot of, anxiety right now in the market. There are a lot of people constantly worried that they're going to miss Bitcoin's pump to 100K or something. But, realistically speaking, given the fact that we've identified for months now that Bitcoin is in a bear market, and we are just in general, we're in a macro risk off time. There really is no real reason to assume that Bitcoin is about to go to six figures, unfortunately. Okay. We recognize that it is a bear market. It has all the characteristics of a bear market in terms of putting in lower lows, the dominance going higher, all Bitcoin pairs bleeding. We've seen this many times before, and there's no reason to assume this time is different when you've seen it happen multiple times and it's played out the exact same way. Okay. So with that in mind, could we have relief rallies? Of course, we probably will. I mean, I even put out a video a few weeks ago saying that I think we're going to have a relief rally for Bitcoin coming up in the next few weeks that could even take us back to 40K for all I know. But I want to talk about how you can best plan for the next several years with Bitcoin, and how you can have the right mindset to navigate the cryptoverse right now. Okay, so we know, at least if history is any indication, that the price of Bitcoin corresponds to the fair value, if it's non-bubble data, at the halving. Okay, we said this, we've mentioned this many times before. You can see in 2019, this was November 24th, 2019. We talked about, at the halving, the fair value would be around $8,000. I think we were just slightly above it, maybe like 8,500. And then we made a follow-up video, at the actual halving, saying that we would expect, Bitcoin's price to be at around, right, $8,000.
Okay, so what he's saying here, and this video was recorded just over a year ago, of June 2022. What he's saying here is that history shows that at the halving, Bitcoin halving, which we've had 3 of them so far, at the halving, Bitcoin is right at its fair market value. Now, a range of experts are saying right now the fair market value for Bitcoin is in between 45 and 55,000. They're saying that's the fair market value right now. Today it's at 29,000, so that would make it a bargain. But we're talking about once it reaches the halving, which is predicted to be April 2022, it should be at a fair market value, which currently is somewhere between 45 and 55,000. So let's keep watching. Let me scan up here a little bit to the next clip. But as of right now, that means Bitcoin's a value. So if you believe it's going to go up from here, then I need to start buying because it's headed to its fair market value.
All right, there's a lot of coincidences there. You can also see that last cycle we bottomed at the 200-week moving average, which also was at the fair value, and that also happened in the cycle before that as well. So personally, I think that we could see a relief rally, but I'm not convinced that 25K is the bottom. Okay, I'm certainly not. And given the fact that we still have 22 months before the next Bitcoin halving, we certainly have plenty of time to test that theory as to whether 25K is actually the bottom. Now, one thing to consider, the bottom tends to correspond well before the halving. Okay, so for instance, in this cycle, the bottom occurred in November of 2011, but by the time we actually hit the halving, Bitcoin had already pumped almost 400%. In the cycle before that one, by the time we hit the halving, the price of Bitcoin had pumped 250% or so. From the cycle before that one, the price of Bitcoin by the time we hit the next halving had already pumped about 150%. So you can see this is around 350, this is around 250, this is around 150. So every single time the value of Bitcoin at the halving, it corresponded to the fair value, but it wasn't actually the cycle bottom. Okay, the cycle bottom was actually less, right? But the pump from the cycle bottom into what would be the fair value by the halving, you can see it's diminished each time. I think a lot of people have.
Okay, so he's circled the fair market values there, and what's interesting that I took away from this, and you probably didn't see it unless you were paying really good attention, but the bottom prior to the halving on each of these was in between October and December of the prior year. So if let's just forecast into the future. So if the halving for 2024 is in April, the history, which has been mostly where the halvings have been, right in that range, the bottom of that of Bitcoin is hit in October, November, December, which means if it's going to repeat history, we're going to see Bitcoin decline from here. It's going to decline down until we get closer to the end of this year, going into the halving. Now there's a bunch of data that goes behind this. I'm just running through these videos, but what I want you to focus in on here is what we're seeing. The trend is that Bitcoin declines prior to its halving, roughly 4 to 6 months, somewhere in that range, before it gets to the halving. So as an investor, that's got me thinking, okay, I don't want to buy yet. Although the fair market value is going to be 45 to 55 in April of next year, the history is telling us that it's going to decline. So let's go on to the next little clip here.
Accumulation year, right? It'll likely be an accumulation year, gearing up for the next halving. And one thing to consider too is that it actually would work really well with the macro environment, I think. If you think about it, Bitcoin right now is struggling, but a lot of risk on assets are struggling. And why are they struggling? Well, namely inflation, right? I mean, the Fed's raising interest rates, but if you go look at inflation, inflation is just kind of out of control, right? It's been out of control.
Okay, so now we're starting to get into the macro, because it can't be just as simple as following the history, right? It's also got to have to do what's going on in the market, right? We're looking at possibly going into recession, but there's a Bitcoin ETF that's on the horizon that's probably going to come out. So what's that going to do? So that's what makes this stuff so hard, is that there's all these pieces that are happening that could send Bitcoin one way or the other. So let's start getting into the actual macro of this. So we're going to fast forward to this next video, which was just recorded about a week ago. And this is with Darius Dale, who has become a major presenter for a lot of channels, because this guy has a background graduated from Yale, and then he went to work for a company creating these charts, tracking macro events and presenting them to major hedge funds. So this guy is, I hesitate to call anybody an expert, but he is essentially quickly becoming the expert when it comes to macroeconomics and stuff that's going on that's impacting the financial markets. So let's get into a little bit of what he's got to say about this.
A very mild recession. And I say mild because 4.5 would be on the very low end of where the unemployment rate tends to rise to in recession. In fact, the median value in terms of the terminal unemployment rate during recession is 7.7%. So I think it's going to take something that looks like more than a mild recession in the data for the Fed to actually start to panic and deliver the market the rate cuts in QE that'll obviously take Bitcoin, north of 100,000 next year.
So do you think that Bitcoin could go north of 100,000 next year? Or are you saying that process could start next year?
Oh, I think by the end of next year, probably headed north of 100,000. We are in a liquidity cycle upturn. I think, the folks like myself, Michael Howe, Rob Paul, a buddy of mine, we've all have different models in terms of trying to identify where we are in the liquidity cycle. And the reality is it did bottom in the fall of last year. The process to seeing the liquidity cycle upturn has not been a smooth linear ride. But the reality is that as long as we continue to trudge forward, 3 months at a time, 6 months at a time, you're talking about a situation where, Bitcoin will have the wind at its sails again. It does not have the wind at its sails currently. And the reason for that is that liquidity right now in the very immediate term is actually moving in the wrong direction.
Okay, so now we're starting to get into liquidity. And like I had mentioned earlier, crypto thrives on liquidity. If there is a lot of liquidity or money in the markets, then crypto's going up because it's considered a risk asset. So people have extra cash, they're willing to invest. If they don't have extra cash, they got to pay bills. They're not putting it into crypto. And this is where I had a huge aha moment. So really what all this comes down to is Bitcoin still a risk asset, or is it a legitimate investment? And we are at this pinnacle where, depending on whether you're a trader or a hodler, you might believe one way or the other. But there's these forces that are trying to force you one way or the other. Bitcoin ETF is coming out. It's a, all the institutional money is going into it. Well, that's evidence that Bitcoin is no longer a risk asset. As where if you look at like some of these traders or some of the stuff we're watching now, people are saying, no, Bitcoin's still a risk asset. It thrives on liquidity. So you got to look at both going forward. So let's jump forward here to the next little take.
So 12 months later, 15 months later, that's actually really in line with what we've historically seen. It'd be interesting if history repeated itself once more.
Yeah, no, I would expect to see, a pretty significant drawdown in Bitcoin, probably, sometime between Q1 of the next year and the spring of next year prior to the halving. The history of Bitcoin in the years prior to halving is actually quite volatile. You tend to see multiple 20 to 40% corrections in the year leading up to the halving cycle. And so I don't think this year is going to be particularly, we already seen one, right? I don't think this year is going to be particularly different in that regard. But we also have something that we have yet to price in our view, is again that recession process that's likely to commence, maybe no sooner than one quarter, but certainly in our view, probably by 2-3 quarters.
Okay, so I skipped over a little bit of something. I don't know how I managed to leave this off, but that last little clip I played, you heard him say Bitcoin will be basically, I'm paraphrasing, but he basically said Bitcoin will easily be 100 grand by 2024. So not by the halving, not April 2024, but by the end of 2024.
Right.
And that all ties into the liquidity. Basically what he's saying, and he's going to, I've got a couple more clips that he'll get into it, but essentially what Darius Dale is saying is that we are headed for a recession. The inflation or the liquidity is being sucked out of the system right now, and we're headed towards a recession, which is what the Fed wants. That's how they're trying to get us back on track, even though it's painful. We're going to hit a bottom, and they're going to have to start pumping liquidity back in. They're going to have no choice. Everybody is saying this. Once that happens, then Bitcoin, along with all these cryptos, are going to start going back up. And that's getting us, we're going into the late 2024 there. So this is where he's tying all this stuff together. Okay, so on to the next here.
Non-bank financiers are growing their balance sheets as well. And ultimately, how does that money filter through the economy? So, there's a lot of stuff to watch, but that's kind of a long-winded way of saying you're probably going to see S&P outperform Bitcoin over the next 6 to 9 months, in our view. And ultimately, I do believe from whatever peak the S&P reaches, you're talking about a market that's going to be down let's use the interquartile range to be specific, a market that's going to be down, stock market, 19 to 39%. Bitcoin's probably going to be down several multiples of that in that business cycle process. But ultimately, those are big buying opportunities. If you're a prudent, thoughtful investor, certainly if you're someone who's taking advantage of, the fact that consensus was dead wrong on this recession view year to date, you have some cash to invest. And so, the prudent thing to do would be just give it a few more months, maybe 1 to 2 more quarters before you start to see a lot of that weakness that we expect you to be able to buy into ahead of what I think is going to be a raging bull market in crypto in 2024.
Darius, pleasure to have you here again.
Okay, so you just heard him. We're headed towards a raging bear market, but there is going to be a lot of turbulence.
Did he say raging bear market or raging bull market?
Bull market. Did I say bear? Raging
said
bull
bear.
market.
Right.
Sorry. Thank you.
Yes, I was positive, and then you came in and said it was a bear market, and I thought, yeah, it's a bear market, or it's a bull market.
Yeah, raging bull market, and here's the highlights, and because I'm trying to keep this as condensed as possible, I don't know that we got some of this in, but here's some stuff, quick notes that I took away from it. Traditionally, the market peaks about a month before it starts to decline. And it's the same thing with jobless claims. When you see jobless claims start to really escalate month over month or quarter over quarter in a short span, you better believe a recession is coming. And that what they're telling us is you may not hear that from the government, but as soon as you see the jobless claims start to really escalate month to month, quarter to quarter, we're headed into a recession, or we are in a recession. If you see that coupled with the market, the financial markets peaking and then a decline. So those two are two major indicators, which is very interesting. A market peaking and then a month later, it's falling to pieces, right? So very interesting. 45,000 roughly is the fair market value for Bitcoin. So that's what we could expect to see based on history. At the halving of roughly in April 2024 is when the halving is. The fair market value of Bitcoin is 45,000. That is a realistic value to see, but we're going to probably see a lot of turbulence before we get that, which may bottom out the last quarter of this year based on history again, right? So this is going off charts and history. That might be your buying opportunity. Now, again, I'm buying some every month, but I've got some chunks of money sitting on the side that I'm waiting for buying opportunities. Leading into the end of year of 2024, you're looking at 100,000 is a very realistic number for Bitcoin based on its history and a lot of other numbers. Now, a lot of these experts consider that a conservative number. There's plenty of them, including Raoul Pal, who we watched, I think, the videos last week, where he was saying 3 times the all-time high would be the worst bull market for Bitcoin ever. And the all-time high was just short of 70,000. So you're talking about 180 minimum, basically, is what Raoul Paul's saying. And that is what a lot of the experts are saying, is you can expect between 100 and 200 grand a coin by the end of 2024. And then it just continues to go up from there. This is not guaranteed. It's not financial advice. You got to do your own research. But this is what a lot of these guys who are deep into this crypto, either professionally and financially, or both, and this is what they're seeing over and over and over again. And so in the next coming videos that we're doing, I'm going to continue to try and spell this out and provide more documentation showing these consistent themes of what's happening. I'm also going to get into some of the hodlers like Michael Saylor and Raoul Pal, who are telling you, do not try to time this market. You need to buy and buy now as much as you can, because of all, not only because of the value increase of Bitcoin, but because of the security and all the other things that are going on with the cryptography. Bitcoin is considered the most secure digital network in the world ever created, and it is revolutionizing everything. It is a big, big deal. It is way more than money. Like Michael Saylor says, if you think Bitcoin is just about the money, you are not paying attention. So we're going to get into some more of that also. So that's what I got on Bitcoin. Don't see it at 100,000 by halving, although it's possible. But by the end of 2024, the experts are saying, take it to the bank.
All right. So after talking about what Ryan said and the potential leap in value of Bitcoin, you know, of course, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has to throw his 2 cents into the ring. And he says that one of the things he wants to do if and when he becomes president is remove the capital gains tax from anything invested in Bitcoin, which would be huge. Because right now, you know, the government's like, hey, look, there's nothing protecting you if you lose your money in Bitcoin. There's nothing. We're not doing anything. You don't get any tax write-off if you lose all. But if you make any profit, we're going to take 40 or 50%. You know what I mean? And that's in Bitcoin. That's everything. If you buy it right now for $29,000 and it runs up to $1 million, if you ever get rid of it, if you ever sell it, they're taking a chunk of it. And actually, there's some people in Congress that are trying to get the capital gains tax, even if you do not have a taxable event, just based on what it's worth the next year. So you've got people from both ends trying to get your money. And Mr. Kennedy Jr. is saying that he wants to eliminate the capital gains tax, several other things. He wants, the U.S. dollar to be backed in Bitcoin, which that's almost a pipe dream at this point. You know, like everybody says that. Everybody in the crypto industry says, oh, that would be the best thing. But, that would be so hard to get through Congress, you know, and it's so easy to say when you're running for president. Yeah. when you're running for president, man, what a cool thing to say.
Yeah.
But it's very unlikely. But there are things, you know, like DeSantis, who talks about making sure that he just says no CBDCs. There's stuff that you can do, and potentially no capital gains tax on Bitcoin. But unfortunately, that comes and goes with the president. So he could say that right now and everybody could buy into Bitcoin. And then in the next 4 years, they could say, okay, now if you sell, it's still based on what you bought it for. So it's a tricky subject, but it is pretty cool to hear them openly discussing not just a few things about it. I mean, this is one of the hot topics of this presidential election is CBDCs, Web3, Bitcoin, the SEC versus crypto, all of that. So we'll be keeping on top of it, especially as we get closer to the election, when we get to hear, you know, Donald Trump with his NFT collection. Now you can just trade them 1 for 1 on OpenSea. Let's see what Mr. Kennedy Jr. decides, if he's going to have an NFT collection. There's a lot of cool stuff that could be happening.
I'll tell you what, any presidential candidate that's willing to dye their face the same color as Bitcoin, we
got 2 of them.
We got 2 of them.
Between, Robert and Donald, we've got 2 orange candidates. I mean, what do they call it? Orange pill?
Orange man.
They've orange pilled so hard that their face is orange. So, all right.
Yeah, crazy
But,
stuff.
yeah, that's exciting. So potentially a lot of money in Bitcoin, especially coming up to the halving, which of course leads right up to the presidential election. And you got a lot of presidential candidates talking about Bitcoin. So it will be an exciting year. 2024 will be a what do you call it? A raging bull market. There will be a lot of volatility, but a lot of times that's a good time to make some money. So
we're gonna be busy on this channel, Ben, pumping out content. There's just so much stuff happening. All right, Ben, like you said, we've got some vacations coming up over the next week or 2. I'm going to try and just recirculate some of our old stuff because we got a ton of videos now. So be watching for that. But we're going to be coming back, rocking and rolling like always. So thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Have a wonderful rest of your summer.